Alrighty, we are live. We'll wait for a few people to get on. So you look like in a lovely spot up there, Sue. Whereabouts are you?
I'm
Nelson.
back in Nelson for the weekend. I've
Yep.
mainly been up in the North Island for this year, actually. But
Okay.
yeah, enjoying catching up with my daughter and my parents down here and some friends. So, and primo weather in Nelson this weekend, which is very cool.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah.
Excellent. You up at Auckland for work and so forth?
I'm all over the
Well,
place.
North Island, sorry.
Yeah, but I've mainly been in Tauranga for the last few weeks, trying to understand the community there and how I can help them and what we can do, that sort of thing. So just in the process of shifting permanently up there. So.
Yeah, awesome. Alrighty, we're starting to get, we've got about 10 people on and growing quickly, so we will get into it. Thanks. Good morning, everyone, on this Easter Monday. Welcome to a Kiwi Voice. You know me, Lucas Lawmans. We are sitting here with Sue Gray, a co-leader of the New Zealand Outdoors and Freedom Party, as scheduled to have a yarn with us. Thanks for taking the time to hang out, Sue. Really appreciate you joining us.
And thanks, Lucas. I hugely appreciate being on your show. You're doing a great job covering the issues that the mainstream media aren't really willing to go and cover. So thank you so much.
Awesome. No, I appreciate that. So just a prerequisite, team, everyone that's jumping on, please, I won't be able to see it straight away because my phone's a little bit away from me, but please let us know if we're having any sound issues. I have turned my mic level down to half from when we interviewed Sesh, so hopefully we won't have that issue. But chuck the message up there and I will quickly scroll through in a few minutes in between questions just to double check we're not screwing up the interview, and we'll go from there. So, right, Sue. Okay, just to kick off things like I do with all guests, tell us a little bit about yourself, as much as you're comfortable with sharing. Who is Sue Gray?
Yeah, I guess I'm many things. I'm a mother. I've got 3 children. The youngest is now 18. The oldest is 26. The oldest 2 are living in Scotland, which is a sign of the times in New Zealand in a way, that the opportunities are there, not here. I've got a science degree in biochemistry and microbiology. I worked as a health protection officer for a few years, and then I started studying law. And for approximately the last 30 years, I've been practicing in law, mainly acting in the kind of David and Goliath cases for the underdog against the establishment.
Right. Yeah. And is it
on here? But I think it'll be all right.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's all right. You sounded nice and clear. Then that's all good. So in terms of the causes that I'm just going to go slightly off track already off the questions we had, Sue. In terms of the causes, that you were fighting, you talked David versus Goliath. Has it been that way? More recently, or have you always sort of taken up those kind of cases?
Yeah, look, I've pretty much always done those cases. I did a lot of work on medicinal cannabis law reform for sick people who are being prosecuted for using a product that actually helped take away pain and made their lives better. I acted for the shark cage divers who were being in the High Court and up to the Supreme Court, who were lost their access to a permit. I've acted for sort of niche wool growers, for niche fishermen. Mainly I seem to be acting for the one guy that can see an opportunity, who's standing up against the establishment and getting done over, really, because the establishment doesn't like people challenging it. The last couple of years, a lot of it obviously has been with the COVID issues, since I couldn't understand why we were all being locked inside when the best way to get ourselves healthy was to get out in the sunshine and enjoy the outdoors.
Yeah, 100%. And you read a little bit about your advocating around medicinal cannabis products, and I wasn't aware that you were doing that, and really happy that you are, because that is bananas, our rules around that at the moment. Completely agree with you, and you're disappointed the way that the referendum went as well. So awesome work. Now, so did you mention that you had a bit of an echo, did you say?
Yeah, my voice is okay, but yours, oh no, actually mine's echoing back a little bit too.
Is it too, because I'm getting a very slight one in the back. Is it a problem for you? You're right to keep going, or should we have checked this?
We'll keep going. If it gets worse, we'll panic, but at the moment it's fine.
Yeah, there might be one setting I could maybe check, but we'll go back to that. Okay, so as co-leader of the Outdoors and Freedom Party, so how did that come about? Were you a forming member, or did you come into it already formed and go into the leadership?
I got invited up to an AGM for the Outdoors Party maybe about 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, that they were started out as an outdoors party focusing on the outdoors issues. And I mean, I'm really interested in outdoors. I've just got back from paddleboarding this morning, and I spend as much of my life as I can out on my bike or out on a kayak or whatever. But I got involved because of this kind of disconnect between nature and our lives. And it really concerns me that the decisions are being made by people sitting in offices in Wellington, and they're out of touch with just common sense reality. So the more I heard about the outdoors party, I really enjoyed the whole philosophy, the whole philosophy of giving power back to individuals and local communities, whereas at the moment everything's being nationalised and globalised. So we're very much in favour of local communities having local solutions, encourage people to have their own veggie garden, community veggie gardens, farmers markets, niche products. Why are we closing down Marsden Point when at the very time in history when we actually need our own fuel and our own self-sufficiency? There's so many decisions that seem to be the opposite of what common sense dictates. And just basically disabling our communities instead of empowering them. So I wasn't actually planning to get into politics at all, but I kind of got talked into it. And it's a big learning curve. I've never been involved in anything where people take such strong views and send such hateful messages, even when they've never met you. It's kind of intimidating, but and I was really over it. But then what the system we've got at the moment is not looking after us at all. And it's not only not looking after us, it's actively hindering people from finding their own solutions. So I've spent a lot of time in court advocating for individuals against the establishment on all of these issues, but we always hit this roadblock of the law. And if we're getting bad laws and we're getting laws that aren't common sense, that aren't looking after the interests of the people, it's sort of an obvious step to get into politics and help change those laws and at least get different voices around the table.
Yeah, I mean, and you're exactly right. When you get to that point and the feeling that way, what else is there to do other than actually try and join them and make a positive change? So I can understand what you're saying there. Also do like the sort of basic ethos that you're talking about with the Outdoors and Freedom Party in terms of initially, focusing on the outdoors, but then therefore the link to nature, down to smaller community, and lessening governance as opposed to increasing it, and giving more power back, essentially that cliched term, more power back to the people, right? So, so that's cool. That I can understand the driving forces there. So tell us a bit about the party's key policies.
So the key policies now for the New Zealand Outdoors and Freedom Party, obviously return to a better democracy, reinstate our legal rights, because we have, for example, I did the court case for the Ngāi Tukuihu where we challenged the medicine's decision to roll out the vaccine to everyone in New Zealand, contrary to the law. We won in the court, and the next day the government changed the law. Now, that is not good lawmaking. That is not good democracy. And what it's shown is a complete disrespect for human rights in the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act. So part of our purpose now is to really educate people on the need for a much better constitution in New Zealand and how we incorporate the best of everything we've got to create something that's a lot more robust and balanced. We've got the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act, which is the things it protects are good, but then it's got this whole part at the start that says, oh, but yes, we've got all these really important things, but the government can change the law and undermine any of those things. So it's like, well, what's the point of having all these fundamental rights if the government can just come along overnight in some cases and change them? The same, we've got the Treaty of Waitangi, and we've got really important international rights. We've got He Whakaputanga. We've got all of these really powerful documents that have just been ignored and overridden. And, my view is we're all in this together. Let's all get in the waka together and let's all work out some solutions that can work for everybody. And so the whole idea for the Outdoors Party is to get everybody talking again. Let's get all those conversations that we've been banished from having, get them out there again. Let's talk about it, because if we all sit around the table together, or we all sit in the waka together, we can often find really good solutions. Everyone really wants the same thing. We want, a home to live in that's warm and dry. We want healthy food on the table. We want opportunities for our kids. We want a community. We want to be part of something. We want a bit of joy and fun in our lives. And none of that should be too much to ask for. But for whatever reason, the establishment at the moment is actually not valuing those things. It seems to be driven by these international agendas that are not good for us. So let's get all these things back there. Let's be a voice for all of these different groups that haven't had a voice. Exactly what you're doing.
Well, doing our best. And I really like the way that you say, those fundamentals that, because we're so divided these days, worldwide, New Zealand, it's more recent, last 5 to 10 years, but, getting back to those things that we can actually agree on, those things we can reach across the aisle on, I think that's what you're saying. So I do absolutely appreciate that. And the democracy side of things seems to be a theme that is absolutely running through most of the minor parties that have got any kind of audience at all. Just because of those changes over the last couple of years. That example you used, I read that this morning. I had no idea it was that blatant, that you got the ruling and then they just changed the law. And the same thing with the New Zealand Defence Force and police and what they've done there, and deeming those mandates illegal and then just completely ignoring them, and the Defence Force is doing it anyway. So being a government department. So it's critical that we bring that back. Absolutely. Cool. All right. So is the outdoor, I think you've answered this question, but the outdoors party having a go at the Tauranga seat, the by-election, and if so, do you see your chance? How do you see your chances?
Yeah, so I'm standing as the Outdoors and Freedom Party candidate in Tauranga for the by-election. We see it as a really important opportunity. I'm doing it because so many people have asked me if I would. And we need a candidate. We need a freedom representative that wins Tauranga. And we need them to be able to hit Parliament up and running, because there's basically a year before the full election next year to actually get some runs on the board and start to impact. Well, just give people hope, give people an understanding that we can make a difference when we work together. And so I've done a lot of work around Parliament over the years. I understand how it works. The Outdoors and Freedom Party have been doing a lot of submissions to Parliament on a lot of the different law reforms that are going through. We pretty much always disagree with what they're doing because they're pretty much always taking away our powers. But at least we've got a voice on the table. If I'm in Parliament, we can be on the select committee and actually ask the right questions for people who are submitting instead of just poo-pooing everybody. The other thing we can do from the inside is asking questions in Parliament, so oral questions and written questions. At the moment, I try and do an official information request every day on average, not always every day, but I try. They take a month to reply if you're really lucky. They often give themselves an extension and it takes 3 months. By the time you get an answer back, the issue's kind of moved on. If you're in Parliament, you can get an answer back on the day and within 5 days from written questions. So there's so much more we can do to build a network to support the whole freedom and democracy movement if we've got a representative in Parliament. Personally, if there's someone that can do a better job than me, I'll vote for them. But if there's not, if you can't find someone, please vote for me. Please let's all support one person and get a voice in there that's got a track record. We've really got to be careful because we get people coming along full of promises, but they don't always have a bit of a track record. And it's very easy for someone to stand up and say, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. But we need to find somebody that actually has done it and has led by example and shows that they will, they will do it because they've always been doing it, and this is just another step along the pathway. So that's why I'm standing for Tauranga. I believe that's why I'm getting so many people supporting me, and I hope I can win. I'm there to win. I'm there to be a voice for everybody in Parliament in Wellington the next year until the next election, and to use that as a platform for all of the freedom and democracy parties to have some central place where we can work together to build something bigger. Look, we should be able to get over 50% of the vote in the next election. The only problem at the moment is people think you can't win, so they don't vote for you.
Exactly,
If they think you can win, they will vote for you. With a by-election, it's really interesting because all of the parties are already there. Like if you vote for Labor's representative, she's already in Parliament. Most people don't even know who she is or what she's done because she's not allowed to say anything. If you vote for National and their candidate wins, then their lowest list person will disappear off the end. Well, actually, no, because Simon Bridges left. It's out of either their Tauranga representative or the next person on the list who will take his place. But you've still got the same number of national people. And from what I've seen, if they don't toe the National Party line, they just get silenced. Same as ACT and Greens, they're already in there. It's not going to make any difference to what voice you've got in there. But with a by-election, there's this amazing opportunity to vote different and to vote someone else in. It's not a wasted vote because every other vote is a wasted vote. The only vote that counts is the vote in a new voice that does represent the people. So I'm really hoping that people can pull together and support me on this and support the Outdoors and Freedom Party, but it's also supporting the whole outdoors freedom, democracy, all of the movements that haven't got a voice at the moment.
Yep, 100%. And that's what a couple of the other candidates have talked about. Getting that voice in there. Tauranga is an interesting one, like you say, because it's almost like a foot in the door or a head start to the big show next year. I will chuck the links up to all the Outdoors and Freedom Party info into the description of this video once we've posted, as I have done with the other people we've talked to. So, you sound like you've definitely got a plan with that, Sue. That's pretty strong. Further from that, moving on from Tauranga, how do you see the party's chances heading into the fall election? I mean, do you have a goal for that? Do you want to try and hit the 5% threshold? What's the go there after Tauranga?
Well, hopefully by the next election, we would have won Tauranga and we will get the democracy voice back on the table. So that will give a huge platform for the 2023 elections. If that doesn't work out, there's still a huge opportunity at the 2023 elections. It really is the biggest challenge, I believe, is actually getting the freedom voices to work together rather than the old divide and conquer that we've been having trouble with right from the start. We've somehow got to find what we agree on, and we've actually got a really good formula. We've been working with one party and some of the other parties. Some of the people that have left the Maori party have joined with us. Because they're over the lack of democracy and lack of freedom, respect in those parties. So we're pulling together a really amazing team. There's more and more people coming forward all the time. But the idea would be to send excellent candidates in every single electorate, the Maori seats and the general seats, and win as many as we can and get over 51% of the vote, or at least a big enough section of the vote that we can make a huge difference, that we can actually then turn New Zealand around and give it back to the people.
Yeah, awesome. So I pick up from that. You're open and willing to work with other parties in coalition of some shape or form prior or after the election to make things happen for that voice?
Well, look, democracy is all about different voices getting around the table and working together. So I totally support the idea of different groups working together. And not everyone's going to get absolutely everything they want, but that's the thing about democracy as well. You've got to work out what your priorities are, what the most important things are. And if we don't do that, we'll be divided and conquered again. So we really have no choice if we're serious about our future. It's an opportunity for the people of New Zealand to make a difference if we can get enough people cooperating together to support and find and support the best people that can actually represent them, who understand what representation means, who understands what fiduciary duties, fiduciary obligations mean. I mean, we just had a parliament occupation with 120, every single one of our elected representatives basically conspiring against the people they represent, that they would not even come and talk to us. But that's just inexcusable. That is not the kind of government. It's not representation at all, is it? It's not what we need. So, yeah, that's the plan is to. I'm not doing this to just continue with the status quo. The only reason to do it is to make something completely different that reinstates the whole Kiwi ethos, the Kiwi values, and the democracy that we have been badly lacking. And I should have said for Tauranga, Tauranga is a really important example because they've had their local council taken away as well. So they lost them from the last election, and Nanaima Huta just announced that they're not even going to get a council election this time. So she's got her commissioners in who will no doubt do what the government asked them to do. So for Tauranga, democracy is a huge issue, and that's why it's actually quite timely that they're the one that's got the first by-election.
Yeah, for sure. And so that'll be a music to a lot of our viewers' ears around that. That's a question that comes up, and like this is the fifth or sixth interview I've done, so I've been learning along the way. But for the first three there, people asking, please ask if the smaller parties are all going to work together, if there's a possibility for them to work together. So that's really positive to hear that come from you, sir, around the Outdoors and Freedom Party. Also, leading on from that, you briefly touched on Wellington and the state of things there and how the people were completely ignored. So let's talk a little bit about Wellington. So you spent a bit of time there, you spent some days there, you actually camped out, etc. as well?
Yeah, we spent almost the whole time there. We drove down with the convoy, joined it in Taupo, and drove down through Hawke's Bay. Amazing crowds of people all the way down, cheering out in the rain there with their umbrellas and gumboots on, still handing out warm drinks and apples, and just incredible. Just the most amazing day I've had. Seeing that massive level of support, and then hearing the government or the Prime Minister trying to say that, this does not reflect New Zealand. I've never seen anything that's more reflective of New Zealand than the day of the convoy driving down and families sitting out on the back of the ute having a barbecue, waiting for everybody to go past, people with their flags. It was just a beautiful, beautiful day. So we stayed down. We didn't actually intend to join the convoy, but I think it was a bit like so many others that we saw it go past and we thought, well, why don't we join it? Of course we need to join it. I mean, this is people actually speaking with their time, energy. Let's go and see what happens.
Yeah, 100%. It was a joyous day for me too. I'm not going. That sounds, a bit emo, but no, that's the way it was for me. It really was. I totally feel you. As I mentioned before, we came on the broadcast, went into Oamaru, and we were coming up, and we stopped at Oamaru and live streamed the convoy coming through, and there was around 500 cars at that stage. And then the thing that fascinated me, and I think just building on what you said, is that at every possible place in the middle of absolutely freaking nowhere, where there was a spot for people to stand, there were people standing there with signs and waving and cheering, and then the food stop at Wash Dyke. And I'm 41 years old, and I've never seen anything like that in terms of community in New Zealand. It blew me away. So once you got there, I probably, because you spent a bit of time there, we're going slightly off track of the questions there, Sue, but it'd be interesting to hear, how did you find obviously where they got completely ignored by the government for 3 weeks, really, really poor. How did you find the communication efforts from the ground? Did you have any sort of visualization over that in terms of getting the message up to government, etc., with all the different groups?
Yeah. So what happened? The convoy people did an amazing job getting all those people to Wellington, and then it was like, oh shit, there are all these people in Wellington. What are we going to do with them all? And we had quite a few meetings along the way, but basically people would just step up and say, well, I'll look after food, I'll look after toilets, I'll look after security. And so people just kind of stepped up and built teams and coordinated, looking after the microphone was a big thing. And the first couple of days it was a bit hit and miss, and the music would break down and things would go wrong all the time. And then we got better gear and more equipment, and it was just like, whatever you needed to do would just happen. And after a couple of days we said, look, we need some kind of first aid tent. So I got on call to some of the New Zealand doctors. They turned up with a whole lot of gear and tents, and other people turned up with gear. So suddenly we had a first aid tent. Everything that needed to be done just happened. It was truly incredible. And there along the way, I was involved in the team that was doing communications and trying to communicate with the government. I was also doing Official Information Act requests to the government, asking them for information, and to the police. So and I was also helping with the people that had been charged by the police on that first Thursday when the police attacked.
Gotcha. Yeah.
and also various other events when people were assaulted by the police. We had Phil in the Battle of Portaloo when his eyes were gouged by the police.
Oh, yep, seen that one.
Yeah, there was a whole series of horrendous events. Corey got spear tackled from one of the concrete blocks. I mean, he could have broken his neck or something. It was just diabolical what the treatment that people were given. And then on that very last morning, we were just camping in Aitken Street, just along from the Court of Appeal, and we heard the helicopters at 6 o'clock in the morning. A lot of activity, police running everywhere, chaos, really. I think it was deliberate chaos. They just tried to confuse everybody, and went out with the cameras. I was trying to live stream as much as I could, and my co-leader, Alan Simmons, he was there too. He got assaulted about 6:15 in the morning, so about 15 minutes after it all started, police storming down the street, full riot gear, smashed into him 3 times, knocked him flying, and he got a fractured hip. So he ended up sitting in somebody somehow found a wheelchair. I mean, I don't know how they found the wheelchair, but he sat in a wheelchair for 3.5 hours waiting for an ambulance. And incredible pain. Like, he's pretty tough. He spent his life out in the bush hunting and fishing, and had never suffered such pain. One ambulance drove past and wouldn't stop. They said they were busy. They didn't even have their sirens going or anything. They just wouldn't stop. And but he finally got an ambulance. And once he got to Wellington Hospital, he got really good treatment. So I missed most of that day because he was drugged up at that stage. And I was trying to help make sure that what treatment he was getting. But, I saw pretty much the rest of everything.
And that's the thing. I watched a lot of that on live stream, and I made a post that got quite a big reaction, just text on Kiwi Voice, and stating how I could see in real time the 2 completely different depictions of what was happening on that final day. And any member of the public could. They could go to someone like yourself, or Free NZ, or Independent View, or the Daily Examiner, or Chantel Baker, or whoever, and see what was going on from 18 different angles. Or they could go to the mainstream media and see the one angle, and the text reporting that was the total opposite. Now, granted, the ending of it, there was, whether it was plants or whether it was just the final frustration at the end, there was violence on the protester side as well, for sure. But I think what you're describing about the morning and the 6:40 a.m. or 6:30 a.m. deliberate tactic to catch people disorientated, and it was just absolute. By far, they were the aggressors and pushing forward, and it was chaos from there. So, interesting to.
The interesting thing was that the police, they came straight down that intersection of Molesworth, Aitken, and Hill Street, and they blocked off the toilets. I mean, why would the police block off the toilets from a whole lot of campers at 6 o'clock in the morning? I mean, it's like they were trying to create trouble. And then just the way that they'd obviously been practicing, but they walked in the line up the street with their shields up, just going, move, move, move. And so if you were trying to video, as I was, you're ending up trying to go backwards. And they're coming really fast. Like, it's really difficult to go backwards, keep videoing, because it's all evidence for imminent court proceedings. You need to get that. You need to tell the world what's going on. But, behind you've got curbs and all sorts of other obstructions. You've got to be really careful. I can see how, people, it's amazing more people didn't get really badly injured, because just the way they did it, the deliberate intent. And for the police commissioner to say beforehand that if the police went in forcibly, people would be hurt. So he knew that people were going to be hurt, and they just didn't care. They just didn't care. No,
I hear you, and it sort of continued the theme sort of modelled by the politicians during the protest, with the sprinklers and the baby shark and the COVID propaganda and and what blew me away about that was the persistence of the protesters. In fact, it just made it worse for the government by all accounts, because it just emboldened everyone. Were you around when that stuff was happening?
I'd actually got a hui that I'd organised with a group of other people out of Wellington that weekend, so I missed Baby Shark, and but I heard too many people talking about Baby Shark. But the whole superior attitude, that arrogant attitude of the government that, hang on, it's our parliament, actually. We're the ones that are the people of New Zealand. They're our representatives. How could they forget that they were there to represent us? And I see it's now come out that Grant Robertson knew what was going to be done by the police. He warned the neighbours. And similarly, on the last day, we were getting a lot of information from all sorts of different sources between us, just as the outdoors party, we've got members that are police or their neighbours were police or their children were police, and we were being told, hey, they're bringing all of these police into Wellington. There were lots of other people getting similar information. So we knew that a lot of police had been brought into Wellington that day before Ash Wednesday. And we had strategic advisors and all sorts of people saying, look, this is what we need to do. So we tried to get a meeting with the police. A group of us tried to get a meeting. We had it scheduled for 1:30 on the Tuesday before the Ash Wednesday when the police assaulted everybody. And at 1:25, the police cancelled that meeting. Now, why cancel a meeting with the protesters if they were acting in good faith? I just cannot think of a single good reason why they would cancel a meeting. And then we decided, we were really concerned because there were so many families, elderly people, babies, all sorts of people there having a great time, but we were concerned about what the police might do. And so it was agreed that I would speak out on the main stage. I think it was about 5:30 on the afternoon, warning people, look, we think the police are going to do something. We don't know exactly what or when, but we want everybody to stay and look after your children. You don't all have to be on the front line. You need to know something's likely to be happening. Now, just immediately before that meeting, Heka was there on the stage because he'd done an amazing job running the stage for the Freedom and Rights Coalition, and he'd also been liaising with the police. So he said, "Oh, I haven't heard anything from the police. Surely if they were planning something, they would have told me because I'm one of their liaison people." So I said, well, would you mind ringing your contact? So he rang a woman called Zoe, who'd been his contact in the police, and she assured him that nothing was planned. It was 5:30 on the evening before. They came in at 6 the next morning. They'd cancelled the meeting at 1:30. They denied they were planning anything. And yet we knew there were a lot of warning signs. So I went up on the stage and I'm like, 80% of the warning is something bad is happening. 20% is, no, don't worry about it. And it's really hard trying to pitch a message to people to say, look after you, but don't be scared, and we don't know what's happening. It might be happening. And sure enough, it did happen. And I'm really pleased. Like a lot of families and babies did pack up that day. And that night, but it was a really, really difficult moment. Knowing what
sounds like that's awesome insight. I could talk about this actually all day, to be honest. Well, not obviously, a lot of it is negative, but in terms of the Wellington protest, and absolutely it was planned. How could it not be planned? It was probably days and days, and they were trained. The formations were decided. Of course, it was 100%. Organised to clear out in that way. So and as I said, during that whole 3-week protest period, I had a friend of the show, Fiona, who I've seen chucked a comment up there, was sending me footage back which I was using and getting regular daily reports, and that was my level of involvement. I just wish I could have gotten up there, but awesome insights. So really, really do appreciate that. We will push on a little bit though. So still talking about, actually, no, I'll shift back. I'll go back to this one. Mainstream media. So I mentioned to you prior to getting on that, they've had a decent crack at discrediting a lot of what you say and what you do, or shutting you down, essentially. Also friends of the show, Derek Tate and others will be familiar with that treatment. How does it affect you? How do you deal with it? And before you answer that question, I'll jump into that article that I read prior to coming on here, just a recent article that was on stuff about yourself. This is an example, team, of people that are watching as to the kind of, and I know you're all aware, but the kind of depths that they go to. One of the statements in the middle of the Sue Gray article was, She has pushed unfounded COVID-19 therapies, such as sunshine and vitamin D, which obviously works for pretty much everything. There was many others. I've got examples of which we could drop into. So how do you deal with the media having a go at you? Simply.
It's pretty intimidating at the start, but looking at the big picture, it's well established. First they ignore you, then they ridicule you, then they fight you, and then you win. So that's really where I see. I mean, I've been involved in loads of these issues. They always take a long time. Medicinal cannabis, like the day it was understood that cannabis is necessary for the endocannabinoid system, that we have our own cannabinoid system in our body that stabilizes our body and manages pain and inflammation and everything, and that you can enhance your own response with medicinal cannabis. So it becomes not an evil drug, but it becomes a medicine. It should have been the end of it being treated under the Misuse of Drugs Act. It should have been the start of a medicinal regime. In fact, one of the parties did try and get a law in that if your doctor said you could use cannabis, you could grow 6 plants. Now, wouldn't that have solved a lot of problem? But instead, the status quo is to block everything, to abuse the whistleblowers who dare to stand up and speak about things. And I'm still defending numerous medicinal cannabis patients and green fairies now, years and years and years after it should have all changed. So I'm used to it taking a long time. I guess my niche in life is I'm one of the people, the early warning people that spot the red flags before most people. I'm really interested in new issues and the combination of science and medicine and environment and law and human rights and policy and all of those things. So I guess that's my kind of hobbies. And I'm just used to it now that, I mean, the issue with vitamin D, right from the start of COVID, I mean, I'm talking to doctors pretty much every day who are interested in these issues as well. They're finding research papers showing that if you've got high vitamin D levels, you do not get COVID. You don't get sick. We knew that. And yet what do? They say, oh, no, be scared to go outside. You all need to stay indoors.
Backwards. It was so backwards.
No, get outside, get some sunshine, get healthy, and you don't need to worry about it at all. So all of the issues, I'm used to them closing down. The personal kind of slurring, that's a little bit tough. I did have it before when I acted for a group of ultra-fine wool growers who were done over by the establishment, by the wool board. And we won in the High Court. We lost in the Court of Appeal. And then my client went to a Christmas party and found out that one of the judges we had owned a racehorse stud with the lawyer for the wool board. And
right.
So that became a big case of its own about judicial conflict. And eventually, I got fired at the time for upsetting the status quo. I was doing work for the government and I had my own practice, and they didn't like it that I was challenging a judge. Along the way, we found out that there are actually guidelines for New Zealand judges that the whole establishment had kept secret. We found a huge amount of information. In the end, the judge was forced to resign. And in the very last hearing, after the judge was forced to resign, and he challenged the government, and for once, Crown Law were buying me coffees, whereas every other case, I'm usually the lone voice, and they've got a whole team of 4 or 5 lawyers and support crew carrying everything in. But that doesn't faze me now, because it doesn't matter how many people think something. What matters is doing what you believe is the right thing based on the best information you can get. And there's always some people that are going to see it before others. And that's just the way it is. And sometimes we might call it wrong. If I look at things and I think that there's an issue that needs to be looked at, I'll go and look at it. If I get it wrong because there's more information that comes along and it's like, well, actually it wasn't quite what I thought. Well, what's wrong with saying, okay, called that one wrong, but this is what that now appears to be, and let's deal with that. Unfortunately, we're working with a system that doesn't believe in ever admitting that it's made a mistake.
Yeah, that's the issue.
Challenged and would rather shoot the messenger And, until we can actually get enough of us inside the system to change that, we're really stuck with it.
Yeah.
So it's
and I would steal a line from Joe Rogan there when he says, there's nuance in everything, and just listen to you talk then about certain issues, and you compare that to a Stuff or a News Hub, NZ Herald article, specifically about yourself, where all of that nuance is lost, and they're focused on this is right and this is wrong based on what we think, and that's it. There's no, detail or nuance to the conversation, and that's a large part of what has happened over the last couple of years. Is that's all just been filtered out. And even the dissenting voices that did speak up were censored in such a way that all that nuance was gone. So so I totally hear what you're saying there in regards to that. Now, going back to some of the protest stuff, Sue, have you been keeping an eye on or been attending some of the other protests that have been happening around the country, Freedom and Rights Coalition, Voices for Freedom, all of that sort of stuff? And if so, do you think that kind of thing is working, having an effect?
Yeah, look, it's all definitely working. So I was out protesting in Nelson on the very first weekend of the very first level 4 lockdown way back in 2020. We had a group of us in Nelson. We go to the supermarket and protest while we were queuing up to go into the supermarket, because we didn't know quite what the police were going to let us do. We didn't know how strict the government was going to be with all their gathering rules. So we did that, and then we went on and did a what we called a walk, talk and chalk tour around New Zealand, where we had an open mic. Anyone was allowed to say what they thought, because we just wanted to get people talking again. Everyone had gone from this terrible fear to and being afraid to even think what they thought, let alone say what they thought, because they were conspiracy theorists or they were labelled this, that and everything else. So we thought it was really important to just get people united again. We also did a game called What's Your Line? And we got people to draw chalk lines. And what's the line when you will stand up against the government and say enough is enough? And, some people, for example, way back then in 2020 said mandatory vaccination, all sorts of different lines, all of which have now been passed in the next couple of years. So we were doing that, and then we joined with the Freedom and Rights Coalition. I've spoken at lots of their events around the country,
Nice.
in Auckland and Tauranga and Rotorua and Wellington and Christchurch and Nelson, at least, probably a few more. So wholly supporting. I mean, this is the thing. We've all got to work together, and we don't all have to agree on every aspect of everything. But if we can't support each other when we're on the outside of the system, how are we going to support each other when we're in the inside of the system? So I really am a big fan on building these networks. Look, some people won't protest. They think it's nasty somehow. And look, I never ask anybody to do something that is wrong for them. I think pushing boundaries is good. If you push boundaries, actually life really only begins when you're pushing boundaries. Like, it's a lot more interesting when you're challenging yourself and you're doing something that's a little bit uncomfortable. But I would never cross boundaries. We're always testing where is the boundary and what can we do and what works, and adjust from there. So protesting is good. Having fun is good, like celebrating. The greatest thing in Wellington wasn't so much that it was a protest, but it was Kiwi number 8 wire mentality restored, and the spirit of New Zealand restored, and people with all of these different skills and backgrounds and lifestyles coming together and creating something amazing. And that, so, you could never plan that. We laughed a lot of times that if the government had planned a party on the front lawn of Parliament, they would have got in a consultant, and the consultant would have charged $1 million. Then they would have said, health and safety reasons, you can't do this and whatever. Whereas put a bunch of people together who have got a common purpose of standing up for our freedoms, our future, our children. And look what we did. So you're not going to pull it off every time, but every time you're getting more bonding between people, you're getting more respect and admiration for each other's skills. People's strong points, their weak points, what works, what doesn't work. And that's where the power is, I think, just the whole power of people power, just empowering people and communities to stand up for themselves. And, the Wellington came to a very sad and nasty end because of the government and police conduct. But what it did is it sent these kind of bubbles of hope all around the country. So it's like creating little new communities all over the place where people can share what they learnt and do their own thing. Maybe, have little small home communities, have organic gardens, have painting groups. It doesn't matter what they do as long as people do something.
Yeah, 100%. So you are picking up basically, you're saying there that, most of the benefit, or not most of, a large part of the benefit of all these protests is the bond and the community and the connections that are being made. And I feel that I always tell this story real briefly. The first Freedom and Rights Coalition protest I went to last year, I think it was October, and walking into a crowd of sort of 5,000 people, and it was just like, I finally found these people. I couldn't believe it had taken me so long. I mean, I was maybe 3 months into the original 2020, got back from a trip with my father from the States, and landed back in New Zealand the day we locked down, and took probably 3 months to figure out that this wasn't right. And then was going through that period right up until I got to that protest before I thought, right, this is where we connect. This is where we build these relationships that have been lost. And I've gained some really cool friends out of it. So I completely understand what you're saying. That's what
my first really big one was actually at Tauranga, and I was up there anyway for something else and got invited to speak at the very first really big one at Coronation Park, and it was an amazing event. I think it was one of these level 3 whatever lockdowns they called it last year, and just amazing speakers, amazing crowd, music, the whole package of let's, we're in this together, let's support each other. But since then, I've had so many people come up to me, and this is part of why I'm standing in the by-election in Tauranga for the Outdoors and Freedom Party, is people have said, you actually saved my life that day. I had given up hope. I thought there was no way out of this, and hearing you speak and the others speak, you changed my life. You saved me. You gave me hope. And so that's the power. I don't think the government will change. I think the people are there because they were chosen to do a certain job, and our chance of changing them is very small. But what we can do is change ourselves. We can make ourselves loud and heard and connected and supportive, and we can choose how we want the future of the government to be. And we have to do it by being bold. We can't do it. We have to do everything, but we can't be shy. We actually all have to step up and do what we can do. And that's how we can change things. It's like a big tug of war, they pull as hard as they can. And if we give up, they just keep going. But if we trip them up, and if we do certain things and we raise awareness and we get a bigger team and we do all these unexpected, amazing things that only communities can do, that's how we can turn these things around. And, it's just connections. Chap came up to me at Tauranga and said, oh, hi, I'm Phil Tautarangi. And I didn't know who Phil Tautarangi was, but he's this amazing golfer. And it's like,
I was going to say the golfer. Yeah, I was going to say, was it him? Yeah.
It's not a sport that I've tried playing. And, we've become really good friends just because he's a hell of a nice guy, great family, really like-minded, and you just make these little instantaneous connections with people with a different group and a different group. And suddenly there's lots of you, and suddenly you can do anything.
So in those early days, when I say early days of the pandemic in 2020, and some of the protests you were attending then, did you have any issues with the police, etc.? Because, I mean, obviously the most obvious one is Brian Tamaki and how he's been treated. Did you have any issues around? I got spoken to by a couple of policemen, but nothing. That's it. That's all I ever really dealt with in my time.
And in 2020, the police were much more relaxed. We did have somebody called the police when we were doing one of the protests at the supermarket, and 2 or 3 police cars came, and three police officers, And I went and had a chat with them, and I'd actually just seen one of those amazing speeches in America where someone had sort of stood up to the police and said, "What side of history do you want to be on?" And so I did the same kind of talk to the police, and you guys should be on our side. We're all wanting peace and a good community here. And they were actually really cool. They listened, and in the end, they agreed that we were quite entitled to write with chalk. We were quite entitled to protest peacefully. There were no issues at all. We had a similar meeting when we were down in Oamaru, talking down there, but again, the police just drove past and didn't have an issue at all with chalking or anything else. It's only and last year when they started to get really, really hard, and I think it was a concerted campaign by the police. I've seen the bail conditions, and what they do is they go along to an event, they pick on a couple of leaders, and then they charge them with whatever they charge them with, and then they impose really strict bail conditions to try and stop them and break up the whole thing and intimidate people. And when you look at the bail conditions, they're often illegal. How can you have a bail condition that somebody can't use their cell phone, especially when the courts were closed and the only way you could report into court was with your cell phone? I mean, you pay your bills with a cell phone for a lot of people. So they were just getting away with whatever they could get away with, which is illegal, bad practice. But unless we stand up and fight it, they just keep doing it. So I'm really appalled at the police conduct as it's gone on. I think they're acting for political motives, which is not what the police are for. Their job is to act in the public interest and really clear under the Policing Act what their duties are. I've made a series of complaints to the Independent Police Complaints Authority, and I'm sure there'll be some charges arising out of some of the conduct that they did where they assaulted people. They've got no right to assault people. A friend of mine got cracked ribs. Alan got his fractured hip and had to have a full hip replacement. When he was waiting in the medic tent, somebody else had a fractured shoulder. People were getting pepper sprayed in the eyes. Lots and lots and lots of people were being assaulted and injured by the police. How can that be right? But
yeah, not at all.
Yeah.
It's 100%. And I do. I won't comment or go too far into that topic particularly, but I do know, obviously, and you'll know, there's a lot of stuff going on in terms of the IPCA. So it'll be interesting to see how that all pans out. Now we're going to have to close this off shortly, Sue, but let's close it off on a bit more of a happier, upbeat note. Give us a little bit more of a promo, finish things off about the Outdoor and Freedom Party and plans over the next, any key points you want to finish off on before we close this thing off.
So the Outdoors and Freedom Party are having our AGM at Tauranga on the 7th of May. We're having a public festival type event on the 8th of May. We'll be circulating a lot more information about that soon. The whole idea is to get people talking together, sharing ideas. We've all been so repressed and told that we're wrong for even thinking these things, and that is not humanity, that is not democracy. So we're here to be the voice that helps you find your voice, but we also need you to tell us what's important to you, because as a political party, our job is not to do what we want. Our job is to listen to you and understand what you want and find solutions to take back New Zealand for all of us, but that recognises that we're all, I travelled in Kathmandu in Nepal years ago, same but different. I think it's a lovely phrase. We've got so much in common, but we've got little bits of differences too. The differences should be celebrated, not criticised. We don't be afraid of the differences. Let's use all that beautiful humanity, all of our wonderful skills and experiences and lifestyles to come together to create the most amazing New Zealand that we can possibly be, and use all of us operating at our full capacity, not in some suppressed, terrified capacity. Let's make ourselves bigger and brighter and more beautiful and more connected. That's my vision for New Zealand. But to do that, it takes all of us joining together and working together.
Awesome. What a beautiful way to finish, I think, Sue. That sounds super positive, and I feel you. So thanks for taking the time. As I said, so we're almost up to an hour there. I'd like to keep you on the contact books, and maybe we'll touch base in the future and get you back on at some stage. I always like to leave that door open. We like to keep the conversation going here at Kiwi Voice. As I said, if you've got a chance there, so jump on and have a look at the comments later on. It'll be up there forever, so if you did want to answer anything there. Thanks to everyone that's taken the time to tune into the live. Glad we got the sound issue sorted. We did have a couple of comments at the start saying we had nailed it, so stoked with that. Have an awesome rest of the day, Sue. As I say, we'll stay in touch, and thanks again.
And thank you, Lucas. So much appreciated. I'm off out to the Freedom Market in Richmond now and catch up with some friends out there. But yeah, look,
awesome.
Thank you for what you're doing, and to everyone, get out
Excellent.
there and be alive.
100%. Awesome. All right, I'm going to lean forward now, shut us off, and we'll talk to you again shortly, Sue.